Thank you. I'm Peter. And I'm Derek. I always want to say that Rotterdam is an amazing city. It's our first time here, and we're just totally blown away. So, beautiful place, and architecture, food, everything. We've had a great time.
It's unbelievable. We're super impressed. We don't want to leave. So.
Well, we did leave today. We went to the little miniature
Madura Dam?
Yeah, and we have the little pins. So that was really cool.
It's actually amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a project that we have together called Point Blank, and I'm going to skip to the next slide. I'm going to start by saying dankjewel, which is kind of the formal way of saying thank you for coming to see us today. Was that good enough, or was that okay? Yes? Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm Derek. This is Twitter and Instagram handle.
And I'm Peter. There's my Instagram and my Twitter as well.
If you want to see our really stupid Instagram stories and also follow anything else that we're doing. You want to hop to the next slide? This is a photograph from the project. So this has been an ongoing project now for 7 years. It's a collaboration between myself and Peter. My main job is Vice President and Creative Director at BBDO, which is an advertising agency that's globally around, but I'm from Canada. And Peter is a full-time professional photographer, so we came together and made this project together. And
this is the very first large gun that we shot, and when it came from the framers, when we unwrapped it from the box, is 8 feet by 4 feet, which is the same size as the ones that are in the container outside.
And then next slide. This is the entirety of the project as it stands. So this is 21 guns. It's our 21 gun salute. So it's the entire collection. Our goal right now is to get to 100 handguns, and at the rate we're going, if we do the math, it'll take another 35 years. So hopefully we're still friends.
Yeah. So 35 years from now, we'll be finished the project.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to see the range of pistols here. Some of them register immediately as a gun, so especially the ones with the actual bullets exposed. But if you look at some of the other ones in isolation, if that's the first one you see, some of them look like men's electric razors, or even like microphones, or the Uzi up there almost looks like a film camera. So it's kind of interesting the way that you can look at the image.
And so the only parameter for this was that we wanted to focus on handguns. So not rifles, but actually guns that you can conceal or hold in one hand.
Mm-hmm. And next slide. And ultimately, we want to create a coffee table book, I think, with all the guns. This is a prototype book that we created a couple of years ago, and we specifically photographed the back of this pistol as well for the back of the book to kind of create a nice effect as well.
This is for a show in Montreal that we had in 2015.
Yeah. And how many, just by show of hands, how many photographers are here tonight? So as well. Okay, cool. So we're actually going to get into some of the technical detail behind the photographs later, which we'll be able to get into. The photographs have been featured in a number of publications. These are the publications that they've been featured in, as well as Netflix. There's been a few interviews, as well as just them being featured as part of group shows and also solo shows. And next slide. This is a clip from the Netflix original series called Hemlock Grove. So this is we're very lucky to have one of our guns actually featured on set for the entire first season. And there was a lot of kind of interest from that. We actually had a customer in Toronto who saw it and basically reached out to want to purchase the gun that he saw in the show, and we were able to actually deliver that exact one that was used on set to him, which is really great. Okay, next. The images have also, I guess kind of the main popularity in terms of them is kind of more fine art. So it's been purchased by lots of people from all over the world. We have the guns in many different countries. If you switch to the next slide, you can see some of the installations. So some people just keep it clean. It's also been featured in a fashion photo shoot, and this is at someone's loft, and this is at a furniture store in Toronto called Klaus. So they're kind of placed kind of everywhere.
And the one on the left with the dog is from Architectural Digest.
And next slide. So we'll get into the process now of actually how we go ahead and shoot them. The image that you're seeing behind The word here is actually from a place in Toronto called Movie Armaments Group, and they supply all of the guns for the Eastern Seaboard in terms of like filming movies and TV shows. The thing about these pistols, though, is that they are real. Of course, when you're shooting a movie, if there's a close-up shot of the pistol, it needs to look authentic. So these are actually all real, and there's a giant wall. There's probably like 600 pistols there and other guns and stuff, right? Yeah. Next slide. So Peter will get into more of the process of how we actually create the images, because he's the photographer.
So this is an image from the gun vault at Movie Armaments Group in Toronto. Basically, because of safety concerns, it's impossible for the firearms to come into my studio, so we've been going there about once a year since 2011 to shoot their guns. So we actually moved the studio in there. As you can see, we mount the guns on, with the use of a super clamp, and then we line up the shot with no studio stand. It's actually just shooting it right on a tripod because it's impossible to bring the studio stand into the gun vault. It's like it's almost like a bank vault, a huge full metal door with thousands of guns. So there's a lot of safety concerns, and there's a limited amount of equipment we can bring in. So it's actually a pretty rudimentary setup. If we can switch to the next slide. So here's an example of one of the images, because the images are a composite of up to 100 different frames. We focus the camera onto each element of the gun separately, and then we cut it out in Photoshop. You can see here, this is we shoot at f11. We center focus the camera to have maximum resolution. If you go back one frame, so that's focused on the tip of the barrel of the gun, and then we slowly progress backwards and chop it up into pieces. You can switch to the next slide.
It's pretty crazy as well, because it's really only exposing almost like a centimeter at a time.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of kind of back and forth dialogue to make sure that we're capturing every single part, because as you're racking the focus, there's other parts that start showing up, and then it's like one will be razor sharp and the other part will be slightly soft. So it's really quite a frustrating process to try and even create one.
So this is kind of a process shot, so you can see 2 or 3 exposures, and then if you switch to the next slide, you can see it sort of building. So there's 2 or 3 other pieces, and then so each element of the gun is added, and then sort of gives the illusion of an infinite depth of field. So basically, if you focused even at f22, for example, at the barrel of the gun, you'll still have an immediate sharpness fall off. But in this method, we are actually trying to capture an infinite depth of field. And it gives it a very, sort of two-dimensional illustrative look. You can switch to the next slide.
So now we get into the inspiration behind these photos. In the background of this image here is actually a gun study charcoal sketch by Robert Longo, who is an American artist that works primarily in charcoal, black charcoal. So the next slide. So where we actually got the inspiration of these guns, next slide, are these charcoal drawings. So if you look at them, it's that exact same perspective, that exact same isolation, and we've always said that our photographs are like a photographic ode to these charcoal drawings. And there was a kind of a realism that we wanted to kind of push farther beyond the drawings to see what would this look like if it was an actual photograph, and you can see all of the detail. Next slide. So his process starts with kind of a gun study sketch, which then we thought he then turned into a more detailed illustration. So hit next slide, and that's the actual illustration that's taken from the gun study, and then we see. Next, our photograph is kind of like a photographic ode to kind of push it all the way into reality.
And in studying these photographs, if you go to the next slide, we came to the realization that there was a sharpness fall off that indicated that these drawings were actually done from photographs. The areas that, this isn't the best slide, but you can see the areas that are circled, you can see that they were sort of out of focus, even though they're actually illustrated. So our challenge was to kind of circumvent that sharpness fall off, and that's how we realized that Robert Longo had actually projected photographs of guns and then traced them. And then we wanted to do an improvement on those photographs that he was tracing. So if you go to the next slide.
So we're thinking that his photographic study to actually get to these charcoal drawings would have had a step.
An image kind of looking like
with an image that looked kind of like this, maybe a little more in what's that?
I was going to say mid-focus.
Yeah. And if you jump to the next slide, so what we kind of realized throughout the process with the drawings in our photographs is it's almost like we're pushing the like the step in between, which is kind of this photographic step, which ended up that we can ascertain that Robert Longo would have used to actually get to his charcoal drawing, and that's how we ended up with these really flat images. Next slide. So there's an element of this element of fake truth, which is the theme of the show, and we thought that these images, because they're composites of sometimes 40 or 50 layers, they're kind of balancing this world of photography and digital image manipulation. So in a sense, there's no way that you would actually ever be able to photograph one of these guns with that infinite depth of field to get this really, really flat and stark and kind of arresting image. So there is kind of an element that this is a faked image. And if you jump to the next slide, well, that was the cool like reveal at the end of the presentation. But if you could jump back one slide, there's actually a truth that we found with the project, and it's really great to like stand by your work and you can hear what people are saying. And what ends up happening is the guns create almost like this forum for discussion about guns and gun safety and gun laws and who's pro-gun and who's anti-gun, and it's really interesting to kind of watch that discussion take place, and you hear people on both sides of the spectrum kind of debating back and forth. And there's something really amazing that happens for us, is that although the image is fake and it's faked and it's it's composited together, there's a real truth that happens in front of the image, which is that discussion. And so we think that that's kind of ultimately a beautiful thing, because that's kind of the purpose of art, is to cause a reaction or to cause a discussion. So that kind of happens right there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll just end on Dankjewel, which is the more informal way to say thank you for hearing us today. So
thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. You probably get it all the time, but are you promoting guns because they're so beautiful in the picture? Is this something, or are you addressing a certain issue in Canada which we think is only in the United States happening?
Oh, that's actually an excellent question. I think there's a common misconception that Canadians are sort of anti-gun and Americans are pro-gun. Canada's got a very high level of gun ownership, except I'd like to think that maybe we're a little bit more responsible about it, because obviously the rates of gun are much, much lower, and there's sort of background checks and stuff like that. But I'm not super anti-gun or super pro-gun. I think I can land somewhere in the middle. I don't want to promote guns in any sense. Like, these aren't meant to be commercials for firearm ownership. I think, Derek, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We're not doing this to kind of glorify or to promote guns as something that are sexy. I think at the end of it, it's to create a medium for discussion. So there's something really cool, and that's why we're here today. And we hear lots of viewpoints, as I said, in front of the actual photographs. And I think that's probably the best way to interpret the work, is that it creates this kind of truth in front of the image. And if people can talk about guns and gun culture and gun issues with the work as the backdrop, I think that's probably the best way to describe it and the best way to talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.